What is going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of Your Requests. This is the segment on my channel where you request films for me to watch and I review them. And I've really enjoyed this segment. I've done quite a few episodes of this, and I've been watching a lot of new releases lately, so I feel like I haven't gotten around to some of your requests. I still have a list of probably over 16 movies. So if you've asked me for something, it's on the list. I'm trying to get through them in order as to which people have asked me to do them. And also, some people have asked me to do multiple movies. And so I'm trying to make sure that I cover people that have not gotten their requests in yet. And this movie I was very excited to watch because this is from filmmaker Jim Jarmusch, who I absolutely love. And because Jim has a few films in the Criterion Collection, this is also a part of a series I do on my channel called The Criterion Corner, where I select films from the Criterion Collection or streaming on the Criterion channel and discuss them with you. And this film is both in the physical Criterion Collection and on the Criterion channel. And I am a huge fan of Jim's work. I actually did, in film school, I did a pretty big project about Jim and kind of like studied him as a director, analyzed some of his work, and I've seen probably a little over half of his filmography, but this is one that I've never checked out before. And I was really interested in it because it's sort of like an anthology film where it's like you have one location, multiple stories coming to that location and how they sort of blend together. And so I was looking forward to see what this film has to offer. And the movie I'm going to be discussing with you today is Mystery Train. Mystery Train is directed by Jim Jarmusch. In Memphis, Tennessee, over the course of a single night, the Arcade Hotel, run by an eccentric night clerk, a clueless bellboy, is visited by a young Japanese couple traveling in search of roots of rock, an Italian woman in mourning who stumbles upon a fleeting charlatan girl, and a comical trio of accidental thieves looking for a place to hide. So, like I said, I was really excited to watch this movie. I am a huge fan of Jim Jarmusch, and I really love the way that he captures the mundanity of life. He does such an amazing job showcasing things in a normal movie that people would just typically skip over. There's a lot of times where he will showcase things that, like I said, not a lot of people would display in a film. And what I will say about this is there are a lot of elements of this movie that I really enjoyed and that I really appreciated. But unfortunately, this is one of the weaker films in Jarmusch's catalog, in my opinion. I think aesthetically speaking, it does an amazing job portraying everything that makes Jarmusch a really special filmmaker. Like I said, capturing the mundanity of life, really providing a lot of life and ambiance into an environment. He always does a really great job in his movies, showcasing atmosphere and like really building setting in a way that I think makes it easy for you as an audience member to immerse yourself into. But the issue that I have with this movie is the characterization in this comparatively to some of his other films is just not nearly as interesting, unfortunately. And I feel like the stories, although he was trying to dive into things like relationships or like this idea when you come from another place, you're born somewhere else and you travel somewhere, like how you perceive that area, certain things of that nature, or when it comes to grief, loss, depression, familial trauma, it's all just grazed to surface level for me to feel like it really pays a lasting impact. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the movie today. So, like I said at the beginning of the review, when I was giving you the plot description, this is three separate stories. You have this young Japanese couple who is traveling to Memphis to essentially just take in the culture. The young woman is fascinated with Elvis. They both love that era of rock and roll music, and they are here. They are in Memphis, essentially just traveling far away from home to learn more about the area and to just sort of appreciate it on their travels. And then the second story is about a woman who has just lost her husband, and she's traveling from the United States back to Italy to take her husband's coffin home. And something happens, her travel is delayed, and so she has to go to this hotel, the same hotel that the Japanese couple goes and stays at. And then the last story is about a man named Johnny, who a lot of people call Elvis, who is sort of down on his luck. He hangs out with this group of friends and they start to get into trouble, which eventually leads them to this hotel one night. And the film is just examining these three stories and how in this one area of Memphis, Tennessee, that their lives are impacted all in one night when they arrive at this hotel. So like I said, I enjoyed elements of this movie, but I don't think it's one of Jarmusch's strongest films. I will start by saying I really loved all of the performances in this movie. I think everybody does a really phenomenal job at portraying these characters. They bring a lot of life to the film. I do think the actor and actress who play the Japanese couple at the beginning of the film are two of the strongest performances in the entire movie. They really were the most charismatic and interesting to watch, and I felt like that story really hooked my attention. But everyone else in the movie does a really excellent job. I feel like Jim Jarmusch always gets the most out of his actors, so it never really surprises me when people in his movies deliver really incredible performances. As per Jim Jarmusch's normal, this film is beautifully shot. I feel like capturing the essence of Memphis, Tennessee, while also showcasing, like, I really liked early on in the movie, these people from Japan have this, like, really grandiose idea of Memphis and, like, the stardom of Elvis Presley and all of these different things. And they're going by all these, like, abandoned buildings, and you can hear violence in the background. And it did a really nice job sort of showcasing when you're from somewhere else and you travel to a different area, this sort of elevated idea that you have of a place. And when you get there, you can still appreciate it and enjoy it, but your expectations can often be humbled by, like, no, it's just like a lot of other places. There's still issues. It's not perfect, but just cool things happened here essentially. And I really liked that through the visual style. And there's really just like an almost dream-like ethereal quality to a lot of this movie through the cinematography. You just feel like you kind of float from story to story. It does have a comfortable feel outside of the third act, which has a little bit more amplified action. But I really enjoyed that element too. The visual style was really nice. And also, Jim Jarmusch, he is a music guy. He has a huge background in music. He loves talking about it and incorporating it in his movies. And so there's a great array of music in here. The score to the film is also really incredible. And I feel like that was another thing that really held my attention. But like I said, the issue that I have with this movie is I feel like everything that he is examining in comparison to a lot of the other movies that he's made throughout his career, it's just barely scratching the surface level. I feel like on the whole, this movie is obviously utilizing Elvis Presley, his stardom, and all of these things kind of in the background, and how they impact all of these stories, whether it's this couple traveling to, learn the history about him, and the second story, his photograph is hanging over the young woman's room, and like she sees the vision of his ghost at the end of that story. The third story, you have this young guy who's kind of down on his luck, dealing with all of these different struggles, and people call him Elvis. And it's interesting to think about, like, the parallels of Elvis Presley's life, and then in this story, like, thinking about the things that he dealt with, and also kind of the complex person that he was and some of the things that he did throughout his life, but the lasting legacy that he left on not only just, the United States of America, but the world, and also Memphis, Tennessee in particular. Those ideas are all really interesting, and I like the way that Jim Jarmusch explores those. The problem is, I feel like the characterization of these people is just very, very surface level, to where I didn't care much about, like, what they were going for. Like the first story, I think he does a really nice job building the relationship between these two characters who are very far away from home. They don't really speak English, and so it's like they're trying to figure out how to communicate with these people, and we learn little bits and pieces of how their relationship operates, but we never really get much more out of that. I feel like so much of their story to me was about showcasing, like, perception of a place when you live somewhere else, and like experiencing that in real time, and like what your takeaway is from that. I really enjoyed that part of the story. The second story with the widow, I didn't enjoy as much. I thought her performance was really excellent, but they, like, put this woman who's really down and depressed. Her husband has passed away. She's clearly, like, dealing with, having to slow down her whole process because of the fact that her plane has been delayed. But, like, the issue that I had with her story is that they introduced this young woman who's also, like, she can't get a hotel room. She doesn't have enough. And then money to stay in the hotel room. They try to get the two of them to bond, but I was just never really invested in that story. So you have this character introduced that's going through this, like, intense trauma of losing a spouse and all of this other stuff. And you introduce this other character who, she's like a little bit overbearing. She clearly has problems that she's dealing with. But I found that the connection between the two of them, it felt like something that could definitely happen in real life, which is what I appreciate about Jarmusch's work. But I just never really connected to that story in a way that I felt like was powerful. And even like the incorporation of Elvis in that moment, I don't know, just something about the pacing of it and the structure didn't work for me. And the last story, I really just couldn't get invested with. I felt like the characters, there were some quirky Jarmusch moments that I appreciated. And obviously he put some violence in there. And I felt like, You know, towards the end, they tried to create this family dynamic that, you know, I'm assuming he thought was going to pack a really intense emotional punch. And although I could respect what he was trying to go for with it, I could just never fully and completely invest myself in the way that I've been able to do with several of his other movies. I kept thinking about one of my favorite Jarmusch movies of all time is Patterson, and that movie is so slow paced and realistic, but the characters are so interesting. And I feel like the way the story plays out and sort of the themes that the film is trying to explore with the character and his relationship to the art that he creates, there's just something so fascinating about watching that movie. And I feel like this was an instance of I really appreciated what Jarmusch was going for with like the connection to Elvis and Memphis and all of these different things. But I feel like with the hour and 45-minute runtime, he was just trying to accomplish way too much with too little. You just needed to expand on this a little bit more. And I'm sure there's some people out there that probably really enjoy these characters a lot more than I did. And I can appreciate it for that reason. And like I said, I don't think this is miserable by any means. I really love Jim. I think he's a very talented artist, and this really showcases what makes him such an incredible talent. I just wanted a heck of a lot more out of it. So have you seen Mystery Train? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was one of the weaker in Jarmusch's catalog. I wanted so much more out of it. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.